In the long stretch of European history that we call the medieval period, commonly considered to range from the 5th century to the late 15th century, the passing of the seasons marked the rhythm of life. Among these, summer held a place of particular predictability. Summers were neither as eventful as winters with their fires and feasts, nor as celebratory as springs with their festivals. They were long, slow, warm, and above all, routine. By late April or early May, depending on the region, the earth would begin to hold warmth from the lengthening days. This warming was gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but consistent. The soil, previously hard and reluctant under winter's hand, became more pliant. It was in this time that peasants would look to the skies each morning, examining cloud shapes, wind direction, and even the behavior of birds and insects. This observational routine seldom changed from year to year. A man might rise, stretch, walk to his field, feel the earth in his hand, and say nothing. A woman might stir porridge in silence while the sun came over the thatch. Children, barefoot and unsupervised, might turn over stones near a hedge, only to put them back precisely as they found them. Such was the way of things. In summer, clothing was lighter, but only just. Wool remained a common fabric even in the warm months. Linen, worn underneath, was also common. The shift from heavy to light garments was slow and, to the untrained eye, nearly invisible. A tunic might be a few inches shorter. A hood might be left at home. A belt might be tightened for practical purposes rather than form. Footwear remained largely unchanged. Leather shoes, worn year-round, required near daily maintenance due to dryness and cracking in the heat. There were no sandals. No linen caps with brims. Just layers of wool, loosely adjusted according to one's tolerance for discomfort. Washing garments became slightly more frequent in summer, owing to sweat, but still rare by modern standards. Some garments might be rinsed in a nearby stream and laid across a hedge to dry, though only on days without church or market. Work during summer was plentiful. The long days of sunlight made longer days in the fields inevitable. From dawn until dusk, excepting the period for midday bread and watered ale, labor continued steadily. Tasks included weeding, scything, planting second crops, tending to livestock, fetching water, repairing fencing, and turning compost. It is important to note that none of these tasks were ever completed quickly. Weeding, for example, involved kneeling for hours at a time and examining the roots of each plant before pulling. The weeds would be placed in a small basket, then another, then another. By late afternoon, the baskets would be tipped into a larger cart and wheeled very slowly toward a distant compost heap. The midday sun, while not as harsh as in desert climates, was nonetheless notable for its persistence. In stone buildings, the air was still. In wooden ones, it was warmer still. Thatched roofs trapped heat, and few windows provided relief. To cope, some people sat in shade. Others drank ale or thin broth. Most simply worked more slowly. If a task took 1 hour in spring, it might take 2 in summer. The rhythm of life changed very little, only its tempo, like a slow ballad, played even slower. In towns, street activity was likewise reduced during the hottest hours. Merchants closed their stalls for short intervals. Blacksmiths continued their work but with open doors and water nearby. Monks in scriptoria continued to write, though their ink sometimes dried more quickly than in winter. Evenings in summer were long, quiet, and uneventful. The sun would set around the 9th or 10th hour of the day, and the cooling of the air was as gradual as its warming had been. Families would eat their second and final meal, often a porridge or thick bread with garden greens. Conversation was minimal. Children might sit with folded hands. Adults stared into the distance or observed insects along the walls. Candles were used sparingly. Oil was more precious still. Most households sat in semi-darkness, speaking little, thinking even less. If prayers were said, they were said slowly, in near whispers. Bedtime came early, not from tiredness, but from the absence of light and sound. Summer required forethought. Meat, when acquired, had to be salted or dried. Vegetables were consumed as they came into season, though some were pickled or hung in dark cellars. Butter melted easily and was therefore kept underground or inside damp cloth. Grain was protected from mice and damp with varying success. Bread, once baked, was consumed quickly. There were no refrigerators, of course. There were only cellars, cupboards, and the occasional pit lined with straw. Preservation methods were simple: drying, salting, smoking, curing, repeating, over and over. The peasants knew no other way and wanted no other way. Change was not desired. Predictability was its own form of peace. As August arrived, the first signs of the harvest returned. Barley, wheat, oats. Each was gathered methodically. Scythes swung. Bundles tied. Threshing came later. No one hurried. Everyone understood the pace. The work began early and ended late. Songs were sung in low tones. Lunches were taken under trees. The repetition of motion, bend, cut, tie, stack, formed a rhythm that echoed across generations. Hay was not harvested with urgency. It was cut in broad, open meadows using scythes, then left in rows to dry beneath the warm sky. The process took several days. Each day, the hay was turned by hand or rake, slowly, steadily, and without complaint. Children sometimes helped. They dragged small wooden rakes or bundled wisps of hay into little heaps. Birds pecked at the seed heads. The sun moved gradually across the sky. Once dry, the hay was gathered and stacked into ricks, tall, conical mounds that leaned slightly and stood beside barns or fields. These stacks were important, but unremarkable. They were revisited in winter. The entire cycle, cut, turn, gather, stack, was repeated as many times as necessary. Nobody rushed. Nobody sang loudly. Everything was done quietly. In smaller villages, daily life in summer moved with such slowness that it might have appeared still. A cow might flick its tail once per minute. A chicken might scratch the dirt with no apparent goal. A dog might nap and then nap again. People moved in measured steps. No one ran unless summoned. Even children walked slowly, barefoot, carrying handfuls of grass or clumps of wool. Conversation consisted of short sentences. Most sounds were natural: the wind, the bees, a cough, the creak of a wooden gate. If visitors came, they were noticed quietly. Heads turned. Doors opened an inch. Then they closed again. Life resumed its pattern, like ripples fading on a pond. Water was drawn from wells. These wells were deep and often lined with stone. The act of drawing water required patience. One lowered a bucket slowly. It hit the surface with a faint splash. Then it was drawn upward, dripping, heavier than before. This water was used for cooking, washing, and sometimes drinking. It was never wasted. Washing in summer was more frequent, but still uncommon. People might wash their hands and faces, but full-body bathing was rare. Streams provided additional water. Women knelt along banks to rinse linen or vegetables. The water was cold even in July. It moved slowly, carrying leaves and twigs. Soap, when used, was made from ashes and lard. It did not smell pleasant. Still, it served its purpose. Sleep in summer was lighter than in winter. Nights were shorter. Air was warmer. Windows, if present, were opened. Sometimes, shutters were removed entirely. People lay on straw beds. Sometimes wool. Sometimes nothing more than a blanket and cloak. Insects buzzed nearby. Dogs shuffled. Oxen shifted in their stalls. Dreams were simple. Sometimes of water. Sometimes of walking. In the morning, light came early. Roosters called. People woke and sat quietly for a while before moving. Summer, like all things, passed. Slowly. Gradually. One day at a time. Leaves at the edge of the forest began to dry. Grass lost its color. Clouds thickened. There was no sudden change. No grand announcement. Only the small signs, the ones everyone recognized but never discussed. Sweaters returned. Fires were relit. The ale grew darker. Bread became heavier. The rhythm of life shifted again. Not drastically. Just slightly. And so summer ended. As it had ended the year before. And the year before that. And the one before that. And always would.